When you picture a serial killer, I bet you picture a man. Maybe this guy. When you picture a female serial killer, you probably picture her.
You sabotaged my aunt's society.
But the truth is stranger than that. Female serial killers certainly exist, but maybe most of them were never caught. I've spent a lot of time on this channel talking about serial killers, where they went, why they vanished, how we went from Bundy to basically nobody. At least nobody operating on that scale today, or so it seems at least. But every time I make one of these episodes, the same question shows up in the comments. What about female serial killers? Why aren't there female serial killers? Hey, if lead was such a big issue, why aren't there more female serial killers? Well, there are. But honestly, I mean, it's a fair question. Because if the whole point of this series is figuring out why serial murder seemed to, collapse, then I can't just ignore half the population, can I? So today, I want to look at the women. And spoiler, there's a lot more to talk about than just Aileen Wuornos. But hey, before I go any further, really quick, welcome to Breakfast Cereal. My name's Josh. If you've been following along the past few months, you know this series has really started to take off. Each episode of this series, I examine a different theory on what contributed to the decline of the so-called golden age of serial killers. The wild peak during the 70s and 80s, and then steep fall off from the 90s onward. So I've compiled all of the episodes in a playlist, linked above, and I'll put it down in the description as well if you want to binge them. And hey, if you like this video, don't forget to get down into the comments and also hit that subscribe button. Okay, so before we get into the psychology and the case studies and even Stephen King, we need to talk numbers. And yes, don't worry, I've got charts. Because when you look at the Radford Serial Killer Database, which is basically the most widely used academic data set on serial homicide, something jumps off the page so hard it's almost comical. Men absolutely dominate serial murder. And now, when I say dominate, I don't just mean like a majority. I mean, everyone else is having a water pistol fight, and then men show up with a bazooka. So let's look at this pie. On average, 90 to 93% of all known serial killers are male. Women make up the remaining 7 to 10% depending on the decade, the country, and how strictly you define serial murder. Now look at this chart. Take a look at that blue line, the one for male serial killers. Looks like a mountain range. It starts rising in the late 60s, goes full Everest in the late 70s and early 80s, and then boom, crashes down into the 2000s. Thanks to things like, DNA, tech, policing. Hey, but you know that, right? Because you've seen the other episodes in my series on the downfall of the so-called golden age of serial killers, right? Anyway, so you would assume that something, pretty wild was going on culturally, environmentally, societally during that rise and peak there, right? And, women were certainly around during that same time period, if I'm not mistaken. So it would make sense that if we isolate the female serial killers into their own data line, that it would kind of follow the same trend trajectory, right? Well, look at this. That is the female line. It's a hill, like a polite hill, like something your grandma walks at sunrise. I wouldn't exactly call that a peak. There isn't a female peak in the 1980s. It's not even close. But if we go back a few more decades, here, look at this chart, right around the mid-century there. When researchers reconstruct activity dates rather than arrest dates, female serial killing appears to peak in the mid-20th century, especially like the 1940s and 1950s. Yeah, the 50s. I mean, that was a huge surprise to me. You? I mean, with my 90s kid brain, I look at the 50s as it's like an innocent time. I mean, isn't that kind of how that decade is painted? I mean, I guess not. Because apparently, while male serial killers were still decades from their big wave, women might have hit theirs during the era of sock hops and poodle skirts. It's like if the Beaver's mom, June Cleaver, was secretly murdering the shit out of people on the side. I mean, as a quick side note, wouldn't she be like the most terrifying serial killer you could ever imagine? I mean, Cleaver. That's an amazing horror film. I mean, I could imagine the trailer. I mean, they could even incorporate her first name. Like, coming this June, Cleaver. I better get the copyright on that idea quick. But anyway, I initially assumed the female curve would match men's. Maybe a little lower, but following the same general shape. It doesn't. When you really dig into the data, you start to realize something. The 1950s were an ideal environment for undetected female serial killers. It's not because women became suddenly dangerous in some cultural wave, but because the conditions were perfect. The 1950s were the golden era of opportunity for one very simple reason. It was still insanely easy to kill someone with poison. Let me give you the classic example, Nanny Doss. If you're not familiar with her, Nanny Doss was a mid-century serial killer who murdered at least 11 people, including multiple husbands, her mother, her sister, her grandson, and her mother-in-law. She did it mostly with poison, and each death looked enough like natural causes that she got away with it for decades. At one point, she even collected life insurance payouts. She eventually confessed in 1954. The 50s, man. I mean, try that today. Imagine you killed practically every family member within reach, including multiple lovers. Jesus, you could get away with anything back then. See, toxicology was primitive. Autopsies, those weren't routine. Doctors chalked up sudden unexplained deaths to heart issues or bad luck. Or, he was old. Or, he smoked. Everyone smoked.
What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?
And in households all across America, arsenic was in rodent poison. Cyanide was in cleaning supplies. Strychnine was sold over the counter. Insurance policies were easy to take out. Death certificates were handwritten. Anyway, the Nanny Doss type offender, let's call him the domestic poisoner, is exactly the kind of killer who slips through the numbers. And this is where the data gets weird, and where it's really easy to misunderstand what this chart here is actually showing. When I say female serial killers peaked in the 1950s, I'm not talking about arrests. I'm not talking about convictions. I'm not even talking about people who were recognized as serial killers at the time. I'm talking about estimated activity. The decade with the most opportunity for female serial killing activity is also the decade where very few of them were recognized as serial murder. So instead of thinking in terms of decades, it makes more sense to think in terms of methods. And when it comes to poison, Nanny Doss here was not alone.
I climbed up poison though.
There's Belle Gunness. who ran basically a murder farm in Indiana in the early 1900s. She advertised in newspapers for lonely widowers, invited them into her home, and then they disappeared. Estimates vary wildly, anywhere from a dozen to 40+ victims, because the evidence was found in fragments. Her farm burned down under suspicious circumstances, and she supposedly died in the fire, though she may have faked her death, some say. Then you've got Dorothea Puente. She operated a boarding house for vulnerable people in Sacramento. She killed at least 9 of her tenants, buried them in the backyard, and kept collecting their benefit checks. You got Janine Jones, the Texas pediatric nurse who's suspected of killing dozens of infants under her care by injecting them with drugs so she could play the hero and revive them. She only failed sometimes. And those failures, they became homicides. See, women like this, they didn't stalk strangers in dark alleys. They exploited trust. They used caregiving roles as camouflage. As many forensic psychologists, like Kathleen Ramsland, have described, male serial killers often engage in predatory behavior. Female serial killers often engage in what's called predatory caregiving. Now that is one of the most disturbing phrases I think I've ever heard. Predatory caregiving. I mean, stop and think about that contradiction, or oxymoron, for a second. Predatory caregiving. And yet, somehow it fits. I mean, if you turn to pop culture, it's there too. Stephen King knew exactly what he was doing when he wrote Misery. And just a quick aside, I'm actually shooting this episode the day after Rob Reiner was murdered. He directed the film adaptation, and it's great. Rip. So the main character, Annie Wilkes, she's practically the dictionary definition of a female serial killer archetype. She isolates victims, uses medication as a weapon, blends nurture with violence, seeks control, not thrill, targets people who can't escape. See, she's not running through the streets waving a chainsaw, or I suppose in her case, a sledgehammer. That scene. No, she's a nurse, a healthcare worker, a woman whose violence is quiet and buried under layers of helpfulness. See, King didn't exaggerate, he paid attention. Annie Wilkes is like the fictional echo of Janine Jones or of Nanny Doss, of early 20th century angel of death killers. And that creates a strange paradox. Female serial killers may have been harder to detect historically, so we didn't know how many existed. But today, with modern forensic technology, they're way easier to catch, so there are fewer of them. And that's where the whole "where did they go" part of this episode starts to make sense. Just like male serial killers bottomed out after DNA came along, female serial killers likely bottomed out after the rise of modern toxicology. Once testing became widespread, once hospitals started analyzing blood samples and autopsies became routine, it became much, much harder for someone to poison multiple people. There's a reason poisoner serial killers drop off sharply after the 1950s. It's not because women collectively just decided to stop killing. It's because the opportunity disappeared. But opportunity isn't the only factor. Motive matters too. Historically, experts have broken down male serial killers into types. You've got sexual sadists, like your BTKs, thrill killers, power control killers, mission-oriented killers. But women, they don't usually fall into those categories. Female serial killers tend to kill for financial gain, control, convenience, jealousy, revenge, delusional caregiving. You just don't get many female sexual sadists. You don't get many women who kill strangers for the thrill of the hunt. And because of that, their numbers are not only lower, they look different. Let me give you another example. The one you've probably all been waiting for. Aileen Wuornos. She is, without question, America's most famous female serial killer. And part of her fame comes from how unusual she was. See, she killed strangers. She used a gun. She murdered in a way that resembled male serial killers more than female ones. And her motives, depending on who you ask, ranged from self-defense to robbery to rage.
I was a hitchhiking hooker.
Right.
Running into trouble. I'd shoot the guy if I ran into trouble.
But
That's
how come
why.
there was so much physical trouble? Because it was all in 1 year. 7 people in 1
Oh,
year.
well.
See, a lot of people discuss Eileen's absolutely horrific and horrible, horrible childhood. How she had been abused every way imaginable by those she should have been able to trust. But at the same time, that's the same case for a guy like Gary Ridgway. I mean, look up what his mother did to him. Look up Henry Lee Lucas's mother. But even Aileen Wuornos doesn't fit the typical male serial killer profile because she wasn't driven by sexual fantasy. That's one of the strongest predictors for long-term serial homicide among men. See, when the FBI studied sexual serial killers, they found that fantasies almost always start in adolescence and build for decades. Now, female serial killers rarely show that pattern. Their crimes grow out of circumstance, not fantasies. But there are rare exceptions. One example is Martha Beck. Half of the Lonely Hearts killers with Raymond Fernandez. They killed women together, often after sexual manipulation and fraud. Another is Mira Hindley, though she was more of an accomplice and facilitator to Ian Brady than an independent killer. So, I mean, grain of salt. And you notice something there too, though? Both examples were part of a killing duo with a man. But regardless, these cases are the exception, not the rule. Every time researchers study the sexual component of serial murder, they find the same thing. Male offenders overwhelmingly dominate sexual homicide. It's not even close. I mean, the FBI's behavioral science unit estimates that sexually motivated female serial killers account for well under 5%. Some studies have that figure under 1%. So, I mean, what does that tell us? It tells us that serial murder isn't just a psychological phenomenon. It's a cultural one. It reflects gender roles. It reflects opportunity. And it reflects the types of violence society allows to slip through the cracks. But there's one more piece to this puzzle, and it's a big one. The feminist criminology debate. This is where researchers argue about whether female violence is underreported, understudied, or fundamentally misunderstood. Some feminist criminologists argue that female serial killers are systemically underestimated because the justice system struggles to recognize women as capable of extreme violence. In other words, the stereotype of women as nurturing and maternal actually blinds investigators. Then you have, on the other hand, you have other criminologists say the opposite, that female violence really is rarer because psychopathy, sexual sadism, and compulsive predation truly are more common in men. How much more common? Well, you want to see a couple more charts? Nah, just trust me, much more common. When I dug through interviews from forensic psychologists, almost all of them said the same or like some version of this. Male serial killers externalize their violence. Female serial killers internalize it. Meaning, again, men kill outwardly, strangers victims outside of their circle, while women kill inwardly, people inside their circle. That difference in direction creates a difference in detection. And you see this reflected in modern crime classification. Women today are far more likely to be involved in fraud, embezzlement, abuse, financial crimes, or domestic violence than in serial murder. And when they do kill, it's almost always someone close to them. And that is part of the tragedy of female serial killers. They hide in plain sight, not because they're criminal masterminds, but because their violence is wrapped in a role society trusts. Janine Jones didn't lurk in alleyways, she worked in a pediatric ICU. Dorothea Puente didn't hunt, she operated a boarding house. Nanny Doss didn't stalk college campuses, she killed at home. So when people ask where'd they all go, the answer is different from the answer I give in the episodes about male serial killers. Female serial killers didn't disappear. The ones who existed historically were harder to detect, and the ones who exist today are easier to detect. That shrinks the numbers. It's pretty hard to kill 3 husbands today without raising a few eyebrows. Just look at Amy Archer Gilligan. She ran a nursing home in the early 1900s and killed at least 5 residents, possibly dozens more. She used arsenic and strychnine, and she often encouraged residents to sign over their life insurance policies before they mysteriously died. Now imagine trying that in 2025. Every death in a care facility is documented. Drug inventories are tracked. Inspections are routine. Death certificates are audited. If you poison 1 resident, maybe you get away with it. Try 2, somebody's calling the cops. That's the story here. It's not that women stopped killing, it's that their primary method of serial killing became extremely difficult to get away with. But the most interesting piece of this, for me, is the cultural one. Because when you look at the public imagination, female serial killers barely exist. The media has spent decades building up the mythology of the male serial killer. Bundy, Dahmer, Gacy, Son of Sam, BTK, the Green River Killer. It's a whole pantheon. Female serial killers never got the same treatment, partly because their crimes didn't fit the narrative. Poisoning your 5th husband isn't cinematic. Murdering elderly boarders for their social security checks doesn't create a national panic. So, female serial killers lived in the shadows. Not because they were brilliant, but because their violence wasn't sensational. But there's a deeper truth here too, and it's the one I want to end on. Female serial killers were never the mystery. The mystery is why men made up 90% of serial killers to begin with. Men commit more violent crime across every category. They commit more homicides, more assaults, more robberies, more sex crimes. Serial murder fits into that pattern. It's violence turned up to an extreme level. 211. Do women kill? Yes. Do they kill repeatedly? Sometimes. But do they kill strangers for the thrill of it over and over, leaving behind bodies the way male serial killers do? Almost never. You don't need a conspiracy or a hidden wave of female offenders. The answer is that serial murder is a crime built on opportunity, psychology, and fantasy. And those factors have never been equally distributed between men and women. So the next time someone asks why there aren't more female serial killers, I'll tell them this. The real question isn't why there are so few women. It's why there were so many men. And maybe that's the question this whole series is really about.